Oh, nice.
And then also in the booth. So I think he's at the one at South.
So he's in the Parkland reaches,
Yeah,
I would say.
I used to be the one that split between here in Sandy Springs and the one in Jonesboro, but the last 40 years I've only been here.
Got it. Hey, Arlene, good to see you. Morning.
How do you get these two places at once?
It's, well, so that, okay, here's the thing, that thing I'm teaching at 11:30. Just to make sure I don't mix up the topics. That's it. Other than that, easy peasy. It's interesting, the topic that I'm gonna do over there, I think it's fascinating. It's, can you run an online business on Shabbos? In other words, like, you know, to sell something, we want to do that, but like, what about, you have a business? So B&H famously, B&H shuts down. But if you sell on Amazon or eBay, no one's shutting down. You can't shut down. You can pull your listing every Friday, whatever. It's not possible. B&H and Adorama, I think also. That's another Jewish camera place. I think they both understand this. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, come in, grab breakfast.
Yeah, and it's by New York time. So like here, Shabbos starts later on Friday.
Right.
So if you look on Friday and it's
Oh, I haven't done that.
Here, I think
You're blocked from buying it.
Yes, it's a shit you
I
can't.
could check that. I should do the screenshot.
Yeah.
That was a nice talk, totally, yes.
Oh, thank you.
You did well, you prepared, you did a little bit nicely, very good.
Oh, thank you.
You can get that job again. Right. Yeah, but I'm sorry, I missed it. I didn't really give you about. Oh, it's great, but I really think I want to know about the party. Hey.
Kind of works.
That's possible. Unless you know, once he says lying is his favorite, and you can't count ION or something like that. That's gonna be great.
Yeah, but I didn't really do two choice.
I know.
I had to mix the cards.
Yeah, but it could be. I'm gonna look it up. We'll do some recon. The match.
It's not matter. The difference between magic and magic. I like one.
Where was this? And I'm going to call it skeptic. I like to try to figure out.
You want to reverse engineer it.
Yeah. And what is this? Blueberry. Where were you born? Are you serious? Yeah. You can't put cinnamon raisin bagel or blueberry bagel with cream cheese and lots. Oh, is that not what it is? Oh, I see it or not. So now, this is why you get $40. I didn't know I did it.
Only, I was wondering what was the connection with the bagel and where we were born with.
Yeah. I don't know. No, I think it's. Yeah, no, it's fine. By the way, I'm always open to learning things. Hold on. So Jeff, you're saying that stick with the plain onion or added. Correct. I'm gonna say that. But I thought we were gonna go a little out of bounds. But no, you know, somebody got. Correct.
Yeah.
Ah, see, I'm also learning that. Good. See, I'm a student of my life. I'm listening, by the way. I really get the challenge, but it's
Okay, I think we may go a little bit of a different direction starting next week, because I may get in a bagel, cream cheese. Why is Siri telling me, are you serious? I am serious. I don't know what you're going on. We may get like from Kosher Gourmet, like a whole nice thing with the cut. Remember the Thursday platters? The ones with the cut, like onions and the cucumbers and the tomatoes, all that fancy stuff, whatever. And the bagels, yeah, freshly baked. These were baked at some point. No, they're not. Okay, let's jump in. We'll let everybody in online. David.
Good, yeah.
All right. Oh, this is so cool. Good stuff. Oh, we got Tony. Tony is joining. Hey, Tony.
Hello, sir.
Oh, it's been a while.
Been a while. Good to see you, Rabbi.
Great to see you. I'm in a new locale, but same Kabbalah, new location.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Ray's here. Yeah, Dr. Maxie is here. Adam is here, and Dr. David. How are you, David? Look who I have right here. Boom. All right, awesome. Good. All right, let's jump in. We have a lot to talk about today. Get the recorder going. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Kabbalah Cafe. All right, like I just mentioned a moment ago, we have a lot to talk about today, and it's all about speech. We're still on the speech topic. We're talking about things. So that is the agenda for today. So what's important is to know, good morning, welcome. What's important is to know that the universe, or the created world, our created world, universe is a little bit larger than what we're going to be talking about. Our created world is divided into 4 kingdoms of life. Dr. Maxie, good to see you. Our world is divided into 4 kingdoms, known in Hebrew language as Domem, Someach, Chai, Medaber. Domem, Someach, Chai, Medaber. What are these 4 kingdoms of life? Domem is inanimate life. I used the word taxonomy last week. I'm going to use it again. Taxonomy of life, right? How do we divide life? Different ways to divide life. So we have domem, which is, domem in Hebrew literally means silent, still, inanimate. Life, forms of life that don't have overt signs of life. One example of this would be, classic example would be a rock. A rock, a stone, sits at, I think we're using a rock as a doorstop. You didn't notice that? There's like over there, that door has like a rock shoved into it. Anyway, so a rock is a classic form of domem. Again, what is domem? Domem is inanimate life. It's alive. Certainly it's alive. The very fact that it exists means that it's alive. The very fact that it exists means that according to Kabbalah, it has a soul. Famously, the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the founder of Lurianic Kabbalah, which is named after him, right? So the great Kabbalist, the mystic of the 1600s. So famously, the Arizal says that even an Evan Domem, even a still and silent rock, has a nefesh, has a soul. So every form of life has a soul, the soul being that which keeps it in existence. In other words, if it had no soul, it would not exist. Let me just rewind for a half a second. The question is asked in Kabbalah, why did God destroy the world using a flood? Remember yesterday's Torah portion, Noach, all about the great flood? So the Alter Rebbe, amongst others, asked this question in Torah, in his book of discourses on the Torah portions. He says, why did God utilize a flood to destroy the world? It seems very inefficient. For God to destroy the world, he had to do simply one thing: not recreate it that moment. In other words, we say in the davening and chakras every morning, he who in his goodness renews creation every single day. And according to Kabbalah, it's not only every day God renews creation, every moment God renews creation. It's kind of like a computer code that runs, that creates something, that's coding something into being, software into being, a program into working. And so if you want to, you have a web page, if you're a web designer and you're using code, so like if you want that box to disappear, easy, you just delete the code and the box is gone. You don't have to you don't have to drop white on top of the red square. That's very inefficient. You just delete the code. Or if the coder is constantly coding, then just don't code that character into existence at that moment. Are you with me on this? In other words, just don't write that character into the script. in this case, regarding the flood, it would be not writing all of humanity into the script from this point forward, with the exception of the characters of Noah and his family, etc. Point being that creation is renewed at every moment, and including, so again, everything has a soul. Everything that exists is being made to exist at every moment, including a stone that shows no signs of life. It is alive. By the way, to answer the question, why did God bring a flood instead of just deleting those characters or not renewing their contract, as it were? Like, sir, your favorite show might not get renewed for season 2. You're like, what? I love that show. All right. Well, not enough people loved it. God didn't love the humanity. He didn't renew their contract into the next season. That, to answer that question, the Alter Rebbe explains that it wasn't so much about eliminating mankind, but about purifying the world. Water has a connotation of purity, purification, like the waters of a mikvah purify. Mem Sa'ah, which is a certain measurement, halachic measurement, is the minimum amount of rainwater that's required for a kosher mikvah. 40 Sa'ah, 40 is also the number of days that it rained, 40 days and 40 nights of rain for the flood. Anyway, he says that the Mabul, the flood, was a cosmic mikvah that mikvahified, that purified the world, and it was more about purification than punishment, even though that also happened. All right, but moving off of that idea related to yesterday's Torah portion, the point is that every form of life has a soul. Even inanimate life, life that doesn't seem to be animated, things that don't seem to be alive, are absolutely alive by the very fact that they exist. That they exist, they're alive. The Arizal says, "Afilu even domim," even a stone that doesn't move, silent, still, etc., has a soul. So that's the first category of life. The next category of life is called someach. Someach is, good morning. Someach is vegetation. So we have domim, stone. Someach, vegetation. What's vegetation? Grass, plants, trees. You guys can see the beautiful outdoors here, maybe behind me, right? So you have the beautiful, you can see it right through here. So anything that grows, vegetation, is called someach. Okay, that's category number 2 of life, from the bottom up, as it were. So we have stones, or the earth, then you have someach, that which grows, then you have chai. Domim someach chai. What is chai? Chai is life. Chai is life. Good. Chai is life, but specifically it's referring to the life of animals, animal life. In other words, life that moves laterally. It doesn't have to be laterally, it can move in different directions, but the point is life that moves. So inanimate life, domim, doesn't move at all, it stays put. So me'ach grows vertically, so it's tethered by its roots, and then it grows up. Chai is not tethered. Chai can move around. Chai is so alive, it can move. So far, so good. Domim someach chai. The last category of life is called medaber. By the way we learned this in science class back in the day in Pittsburgh, where I grew up. I was born in Rehovot, but grew up in Pittsburgh. So we learned that there were 3 categories. The taxonomy of life was 3, right? Inanimate life, vegetable life, vegetation, and animal life. And we are animals. Human beings are animals. But in Judaism, there's a 4th category. And that is called medaber. Medaber means the speaker. The speak, exactly. Diber, dibur, speak. Daber, to speak as well. Medaber means the speaker, the communicator. Human beings are called the medaber, the speaker. This is a differentiating quality. So every quality of every form of life not only defines it, but differentiates it. So you have the idea of inanimate life. Okay, that's its calling card. Its quality is it doesn't move, it doesn't talk, it doesn't make noise, right? There's no animation. There's no overt outward signs of growth. Vegetation. So me'ach grows from small to large. That's the way someach rolls. Someach starts off with a little seed or a little sapling or a little thing, and then it gets bigger, and then, okay. So in our house now, in our new house in Sandy, so there are these bird feeders on the trees that are really high up. And I'm like, can't even reach that if you tried. And I'm assuming that's right. I can't. You have to have a really tall ladder to do that. I'm assuming that whenever they originally planted the tree, someone put it near the top of the tree, right? A little high up so that the animals don't get to it. But I think trees grow from the top. I think that top part kind of extended up. I could be completely wrong. I just can't imagine, I can't fathom that anybody would have put it up like 20 feet in the air. I just don't know why anybody would have done that. So my point is trees grow. In case you needed a proof, this is how we know. So trees definitely and absolutely grow. So that is the defining, and that is the differentiator when it comes to tzameach and medaber. Sorry, tzameach and domim. Domim life doesn't grow, doesn't move. It doesn't have any sign of life. So meach now grows. What about chai? Chai not only grows vertically, but like I said, it can move. Now it moves vertically. It can move laterally, move horizontally. It can move off its initial access point. It can move off of its base. It has the ability to move and wander. And what about human beings? Communication. Upon which the question is asked, why would the hallmark of human life be speech and not intelligence? Why don't we call the human being in Jewish thought the maskil, the intellectual? Why the medaber? Why the speaker? You with me on the question? We have four categories of domim, tzomechai, medaber, the speaker. Speaker, you would think that that in Jewish philosophy and Kabbalah, we would use the term maskil. The human being is the thinker, is the intellectual. That's what differentiates. In fact, one might ask the question, communication or speech exists in other forms of life as well. Right? Dolphins speak to each other. Dogs communicate. Birds are tweeting. People also tweet now. It's the whole thing. You know, Elon Musk would like to have a word with all of us about tweeting. Anyway. Well, right. Nowadays. Anyway, the point is like this. The question's asked, why do we refer to the human being as the medaber, as the communicator, when that doesn't seem to capture really the essence of humanity and really the differentiating factor that exists between human beings and other forms of life? Speech, communication. So I'll share with you what it says in some mystical texts, really beautiful idea. And that is that no, speech really does capture the essence of humanity. Because what's the other option? To say that people can think? That's still self-contained. Every creature is about itself, right? Every form of life is about its own growth, its own, it maximizing its own growth and potential. That's synonymous to all forms of life. But what differentiates the human being, what really distinguishes human life from other forms of life, is the fact that we have the ability to go outside of ourselves and share ourselves completely and wholly, WHOLLY, with someone else. In other words, to not be stuck in self. You have an idea. You have a brilliant idea. You have the ability to share it. You have a thought, a powerful emotion. You have the ability to share it. You're not limited to you. In other words, at the deepest level of the soul, there is so each one of us has a soul, and our souls have two parts. One part that's particular and unique to each of us. And then there's the core of the soul. And I think we even talked about this in one of the previous sessions. Then there's the core of the soul that transcends self and touches on a universal soul, as it were, like a divine universal soul that is common to everyone. Does any of this make sense? In other words, there's a part of us that's uniquely us, and then there's a part of us that's absolutely connected with each other. It's kind of like children in the same family. So on the one hand, they have their own identity. On the other hand, they share the same DNA as their siblings, not the exact same DNA, but they share commonality with the siblings and with the parents. So there's part of us that's unique, and then there's part of us that is a deeper part of us, we might say, that is somewhat universal. And when I say universal, I don't mean like to our detriment, but on the contrary, in a positive way, that is universal, a little bit higher than self, and can touch on, not limited to self, but can touch and reach others as well. What human ability expresses or pulls from that universal quality of the soul? It's speech. It's not intelligence. Intelligence is the way I think. Speech is the way I can connect with someone outside of myself, thus bridging the gap between me and the other, thus highlighting the fact that in truth we are more one than we are distinct. So, according to the mystics, this is why the human being is called the medaber, the communicator, because communication, not small talk, but real communication, has the ability to connect people together and thus reveal an inherent connection that exists by virtue of the soul being loftier and higher than its particular form manifest in this particular body. Does that make any sense? Yes? Sort of?
So far, so good.
Ish? Okay. Good. Good. So there's two parts of the soul. There's a part of the soul that's about me, a part of the soul that's about something greater than me. And the same thing is true. The same thing is true with our abilities. Our cognitive abilities, our intelligence is all about me and all about us as individuals, and our communication ability is about the we. Is it me or is it we? That is the question. It's not either or, by the way. It's both. We have intelligence and we have communication. But when Chazal, when our sages want to kind of highlight what is a human being, medaber, the communicator. So in our text, we've been discussing what is it about the power of speech that is so incredible. What is it that makes speech so magical? And last week, we kind of laid out the background of speech, and we said that typically what we say is that which comes from the mind or the heart. In other words, you only say what you've thought about. You only say what you've felt on some level before. So speech communicates ideas and feelings. And this is very important to remember. Speech communicates ideas and feelings. So last week we spoke about pleasure and desire, and we spoke about ideas and feelings and thought and speech and action, 7 levels of the human soul and its expression. And the main thing to remember from that discussion, and as we move forward in today's discussion, is that when we speak, it would seem that nothing new is being created, but rather we're pulling from the things that we know and the things that we feel. Where does language begin? It begins in the mind. Language begins in thought. In thought itself, there are letters of thought. Otiot or osios hamachshava, the letters of thought, which means that we think in language. We talked about last week, which language do you think in? It's not about the specific language, but the concept that we think in language. We think in somewhat of a linear way. It's kind of like the difference between seeing something and listening to something. So think about it this way. You walk into a museum and you look at a painting, or I'll just turn your attention to the wall over here. You look at this wall and you see photographs. Okay, photographs of the children of the preschool. And so when you're looking at something visually, the way it's described in Kabbalah is you're taking in the image at once, in one moment. In one moment, you look at the image and you see it. Now, if you were to describe it, so imagine you see the picture, or let's just say you walk into the Louvre. Is that how you pronounce it? Louvre? They say it right? It's a lucky guess. And you behold the Mona Lisa. Right? What is it? You don't call it Mona Lisa? What do you call it? Wait, say it again? La Joconde. What does that mean? Oh, it means nice.
But I'm told most people that see it, they're somewhat disappointed. Because you're expecting a big painting and it's a.
Oh, it's small?
Right.
So much.
Underwhelming.
Barry, have you seen it? Yeah? Overwhelming or underwhelming? Or just whelming?
Yeah, it's underwhelming.
It's underwhelming.
Especially
Really?
the presentation.
Really?
How, most of
I
us
have no
expect
idea.
that painting. to be
Yeah.
Like
I
this.
probably would also.
Right.
Is it small? Oh, it's really tiny. Huh.
Sorry to throw off the conversation.
No, this is the conversation. No, but okay, so what's interesting is so actually this conversation is what I'm trying to say. If you were to describe the Mona Lisa, it would take time to describe it. But when you see it in one moment. You with me on this? The difference between visual and audio, is that how you say it? Audible? Audio? I don't know. It's like an app, Audible. Anyway, the difference between seeing something and listening to something is the difference between something that happens in one moment versus something that happens in more of a linear fashion. So when you see the painting, you see it all at once. If you describe the painting, you say, all right, here's what it is. It's this size, it's this orientation, portrait landscape. It's got these colors, that colors, it depicts this scene or that scene. It's this person, that person. She's smiling, she's not smiling. You would describe it. It would take time to describe. You would paint the picture in someone else's mind, but that would require a deliberate process and a methodical step-by-step process of spelling it out. You read a book. The book begins, it was a dark and stormy night, right?
And this is coming from somebody that wrote how many books?
That's my go-to line.
It's
Always. It's absolutely. It doesn't get in, but that's the first thing the dark and stormy night. So when you describe a scene, it's like the book that I wrote on inclusion a few years ago. So I was describing a Fabrengen, basement of 770, Brooklyn, Eastern Parkway, just describing the setting. You have IDF veterans, injured by the war, gathering together for a special talk. It takes a page or two to write the setting. Meanwhile, if you were there, you would see the setting in one moment. The difference between seeing and hearing is that seeing, you capture everything at once. It all happens quickly and simultaneously. Whereas hearing, it's like a much slower process. Also, the phrase seeing is believing, right? Seeing is believing, which is why in halacha, in Jewish law, there's a rule that goes like this. Ein aid na'asa dayan. A witness cannot be a judge to that case. Imagine you have like the top judge of the land back in the day in Israel, right? You have the top judge, and this judge witnessed the crime. Could that judge sit on the case? The answer is no. The reason is, again, halacha says, ein aid na'asa dayan, an aid, a witness, cannot be a dayan, cannot be a judge. And the reason is because seeing is believing. And therefore the judge that person can no longer be impartial to hear the testimony.
Same thing in this country. Judge has to recuse themselves.
Right? Yeah. So when somebody is so connected with the truth of that thing or with the facts of that scenario because they saw it and they were able to take in all of the facts simultaneously, then there's no potential for impartiality. That person is no longer open to listening to some sort of other picture of reality, and therefore that person is impartial. Now you might ask the question, one second. If we're trying to arrive at the truth, then we should want as many judges to be witnesses, right? We should want that. That should be a feature, not a flaw. But Jewish law is a little bit different. Jewish law has to give the opportunity for impartiality, for the judge to be open to two different sides. In fact, this is something that is not very well known. On a murder case, back in the day, the Sanhedrin, the Jewish High Court, there were 70 judges, okay? But for a murder case, they didn't bring in all 70. They brought in 23 judges. 70 or 71 was only used for like national situations, like about going to war, questions of voting on whether to go to war or to like impeach or to bring charges against the king, like very high level stuff, national interest stuff. You would bring in all 70 or 71 judges. But in capital cases, you would typically only bring in not only 23 judges, still a lot of judges, 23 judges, more than a jury. There's no jury. By the way, the Jewish system of law is inquisitorial, not adversarial. See, in America, it's adversarial, which means there's a judge, but the judge is kind of the referee. And what happens in front of the referee judge is that both sides are arguing against each other. That's not the way it works in Jewish law, in halacha. And the way halacha works is that it's an inquisitorial system where the judges directly interrogate the witnesses. It's not happening in front of the judge or the judges. The judges are directly interrogating and inquiring as to what happened. Be that as it may, here's the point that I want to get to. 23 judges, halacha says the following. It's crazy. It's the exact opposite of U.S. law. If all 23 judges come back with a guilty verdict, you do not apply capital punishment. I'll say that one more time. If all 23 judges on a capital case put in their verdict of guilty, i.e., liable for death, capital punishment for murder in Jewish law, it's a possibility to get capital punishment for murder and other cases. So if all 23 judges say guilty, you do not apply capital punishment. The rationale being that if no one found any rationale to find not guilty, then the court did something wrong. They didn't listen. They weren't paying attention. This guy was not given a fair trial or fair case. That's the rationale.
Guilty.
I hear you. I don't have a good answer for that. All I can tell you is what it says. It says that if no one found any avenue for a verdict of not guilty, then the guy, you do not apply the penalty. It doesn't mean he walks free and roams amongst the populace. You figure out something else to do. But you cannot apply capital punishment. Tony writes it's a check against passion and bias. I like that.
So one guy says not guilty. So if he gets one guy to say not guilty, he's dead.
So the Maharal, so listen to this. The Maharal of Prague, you know the Maharal of Prague, he created the Golem. Maharal of Prague discusses this case. He says, what happens if 22 judges, they used to vote in order from the youngest to the oldest judge, so that the young, if you want the oldest, the youngest, that might influence the younger judges, they would just toe the line. But you go youngest to oldest, and imagine if the first 22 judges said guilty. Stay with me for a second. And the 23rd judge also believes guilty, but he wants the capital punishment to be applied. But he knows if he says guilty, the guy doesn't get capital punishment. So he's going to say, you know what, I'll say not guilty, so that he'll be, as you said, so that capital punishment will be applied. Can't do that. You can't do that. You have to render the verdict as you see it, not as you want the outcome to be. In other words, if you feel guilty, you have to say guilty. You can't say not guilty, so that the guilty punishment, right, will be applied. You can't work around the system. And he explains there's nothing keeping anybody from anything, right? Corruption is possible, but according to the law, you can't do that. The reason for laws of judges, you can't do that. The reason being, because we understand, and this is how the Maharal explains it. He explains it. He was a mystic. He explains it a little bit mystically. He says justice anyway is outside of human control. No human being can say, I know all the facts and the whole truth, and I know what happened, and this is definitively what the verdict is. Absolutely. There's no way that any human being knows everything. It's not possible. Human beings are fallible. So there's no way we have things being definitive. Therefore, the best we can do in Jewish law is do our best to kind of channel divine justice. By following the protocol set out in halacha, we believe that Hashem blesses our actions and allows justice to flow through the judges. Does that make sense? In other words, we channel justice. We don't create justice, we channel justice. It's like you ask a Rav, what's the halacha in such a case? The Rav will say, the halacha says. Not I say, halacha says, right? It's like the law says. So the goal is to apply the law the best way that we understand, knowing that we may not get it right, but we hope that if we're doing our best, Hashem will ensure the right result. Therefore, we don't have the option. We don't have the freedom to try to manipulate the outcome. That's owning it. That's trying to create justice as opposed to allowing justice to flow through us. So if we believe, if the last judge believes guilty, he has to vote guilty, even though that means he's not going to get, the defendant is not going to get capital punishment. By the way, the opposite case is also true. What if 22 votes of guilt and the last guy feels he's innocent? But if he says innocent, guess what? The guy gets put to death. You with me on this? This is even higher stakes. He still has to vote innocent and the guy dies. Again, justice is not ours to create in Jewish law and halacha. We don't create justice. We facilitate the process by which we believe that Hashem will take care of it. And we know the Talmud says if the Bezdin, if the court executed someone once in every 7 years, or even according to one text version, once in 70 years, it's considered as if they had blood on their hands. In other words, they didn't do their due diligence in trying to find enough exoneration for the guy. So capital punishment is possible, but it's not very likely in Jewish law. Now, by the way, this is not a political statement. It's a statement of fact. The way capital punishment is applied in this country would absolutely not pass the standard of law in halacha. That's without a question. The standard of capital punishment in Jewish law and halacha is tremendously high, a bar way beyond the standard of evidence and proof and guilt that is applied in our country.
Well,
That's a statement of fact. It's not open for debate.
first of all, it's not our country. Each state is different when it comes to capital punishment. So it's our state.
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. Good.
And we do apply a very high standard after conviction.
I'm
They
not.
put them on death row. They can be there for 20
Yeah,
years fighting the case.
I'm not saying therefore it's immoral or wrong. I'm just saying that those that have been executed in our country, I don't believe any of them would. Very, very few would have passed a Bezdin Jewish halachic thing. In halacha, you have to have 2 witnesses for capital. 2 witnesses, edus, that's the witnesses, and hasra. You have to have warning to make sure the person knew what they were doing. We know, right? We know, right?
Don't kill that guy.
Don't kill that guy. You know that murder is right. The person has to acknowledge it within a certain amount of time and then commit the crime in a certain amount of time. The Rambam says, Maimonides says, if you see somebody, God forbid, chasing someone else with a knife into a building, and then you run into the building and the guy's dead and the guy's holding the knife, you didn't see it. You did not see it. You're not a witness to the crime. That's not called a witness to the crime. You didn't see. What I'm saying simply is that there's a very high standard in Jewish law. Anyway, getting back to, by the way, you should know, Israel doesn't work on halacha. Israel doesn't work on Jewish law. It's Jews and law, but it's not Jewish law, if that makes sense. Israel is a Jewish state and they have laws, but it's not halacha, Talmudic law, it's not biblical law. Some of it is based on that, but it's mostly based on the English law, and it's more of a Western law. It's interesting, there are some elements that are thrown in from like old school Jewish law, but by and large, and no one in Israel will pretend that that system is based on halacha. It's based on law, on legal systems.
Our law in this country is based upon Judaism.
It's inspired by. Hey, we have to be. Yeah. I was going to say that we put around that phrase Judeo-Christian. It's interesting. We'll do classes on that at some point. We'll do classes on that. Bring some healthy distinctions between the 2 systems. It's very fascinating. I taught a few years ago a course called Crime and Consequence. It's all about Jewish criminal law, and it's criminal law from a Jewish law halachic perspective. It's very different. The Rabbi, by the way, the Rabbi was very much into criminal justice reform in our country. Very much an advocate for it. In fact, there's a whole organization that's all about that's all about helping those incarcerated, known as the Aleph Institute, based out of Bell Harbor, Florida, and has satellites in other cities. It's out of Bell Harbor. Yeah. Rabbi Lipsker.
Rabbi Lipsker.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, interesting. The Rebbe was very much, it's the program is for Jewish inmates around the country. In the I want to say the 1980s, early 80s, maybe late 70s, early 80s, when the program was getting kicked off. So Rabbi Lipsker arranged with the prison system somewhere, maybe in Florida, maybe elsewhere, to get a certain number of inmates, obviously certain criteria, probably, nonviolent offenders, first time, maybe white collar crimes, etc. He was able to get a furlough for a weekend, and he brought them to 770. And he had them as a group by the Farbrengen on Shabbos. The Rebbe didn't come down until he told one of the secretaries, go tell Rabbi Lipsker that they should not all be standing in the same place at the Farbrengen. They should come in and they should disperse throughout the crowd, because if they're standing together as a group, they stand out amongst all the Chabadniks in Brooklyn. And so everyone say, oh, who's that group of people? Oh, those are the inmates. Whereas if they're dispersed throughout the crowd, it's going to be, they're going to be less noticeable, and it's going to be better for their own dignity and respect. The Rebbe was concerned about the respect and dignity of these individuals that came to his Farbrengen. Anyway, that's just a side point that I quoted in my book. I did quote it in the book on inclusion, the inclusion book. All right, back to our tale. The point is like this: speech is different than seeing something. When you see something, you take it in all at once. When you speak, it's a longer and more drawn out process. But there's a lot of magic that happens with speech. There's a lot of magic. And that is what we are getting to. Speech seems to pull from pre-existing information. Speech, when I'm speaking, it would seem that I am only sharing with you the stuff that I've already thought about, the ideas that I have, or the feelings that I'm feeling, that I'm speaking only that which is already inside of me. And yet, as we'll see today, that's not at all the case. When it comes to speech, speech actually creates new ideas and creates new feelings that heretofore did not exist. And the goal of these next, today and probably the next session or two, is to discover wherein lies the creative power of speech. Where does speech get its creativity from? How can speech be so innovative? If it's just a delivery mechanism to take what's inside and share it outside, wherein lies that power of innovation and creativity? So please take a pass. We're going to jump inside. The text is fascinating. It's really beautiful. And there's a lot to explore. Let's this way as well. All right. All right, I am going to get this on the screen as well. All right, give me a quick second. Okay. All right, so we're going to start on page 29. That's where we got up to last week, where it says choice of words. I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this online. Give me a quick second. Just check into the comments. Oh, it's tiny painting. Yeah. David, you saw it? You saw the Mona Lisa live? I'm assuming yes.
She's not in my
Okay. Description, right. Oh, I like that. Somebody writes here, Tony writes that the description of the painting also sometimes elevates the experience, right? The way it's described in those 1 or 2 or 3 words. It's true. I saw a video recently, like a few days ago, about some people vandalizing a no, I saw a different one. The
There's multiple.
Stop Oil or something. There was like an oil. Was it the girl with the pearl earring?
No, it was Van Gogh's Sunflowers.
That's what you read about her. She's going back on display for the first time in many, many years.
Oh, so that was that. Hold on, Dr. Maxey, what was it?
Van Gogh's Sunflowers is what they tossed the tomato soup on in protest of oil.
Right.
But I think it was covered in glass, so.
It was covered in glass. Yeah. Right. Just creates, we're just talking about it, which I guess is, wow. Anyway, speaking about art, it's, there's some stuff going on with art right now. Kind of cray. All right, choice of words. So last week we explained that the way it works within the human process is that we have ideas and we have feelings, and then we think about them, right? So seichel, midas, we have ideas, we have feelings. Then machshava, we think about it. And when we think about it, we're already articulating words the way we frame things in our minds, and then we share them with others. Speech is the next step down. Is you have ideas, you have feelings, you thought about it, you share it in speech. The point here is that speech seems to have nothing of its own. Speech does not seem to be innovative in the sense that speech is just delivering what was already there. Now, talk about choice of words. This is fascinating, especially if you've ever, which we all have, if you've ever written a speech or written an email or anything, if you've ever written or spoken, you know this to be true. Where does he's addressing the question, where does the choice of words come from? Because, anything that you can say a bunch of different ways. Intelligence, but which, have to have seichel. So he maps it out over here, specifically where within the soul, where does choice of words come from? Fascinating. It says, furthermore, in other words, in addition, as written in footnote 52, i.e., not only is the content of speech the product of that which is above it, even the words of speech are produced by a higher source. In other words, even the choice of words is not stemming from speech itself, from the lips, it's stemming from intelligence. And that's what he says right here. Furthermore, the formation of the words of speech stems from chachma. Okay, that's an important phrase right there. The formation of the words of speech. In the Hebrew, it's better. He says, one second. Oh, I'm on the wrong page here. That's why I can't find it. So he says over here in the Hebrew, sirufe osios hadibur. Sirufe osios hadibur. That means the combination of letters and words that you use when speaking, right? The formation of the words, where does that come from? Who decides which words you're going to use? Now you decide, but where does that decision come from? It comes from chachma. Chachma is the highest and most loftiest of the intellectual powers, as in the expression matzreif or mitzaref, actually, l'chachma. That means okay, so footnote 54. Literally, mitzaref l'chachma means the crucible of wisdom. The origin of this expression is enigmatic. It seems to first appear in the title of a work written by the Yashar, Yosef Shlomo Rofe of Kandia, published in 1629. However, the intention here is that the word should not be read as matzreif, crucible, but as mitzaref, combine, integrate, and fuse. So the idea here is mitzaref, matzreif l'chachma, crucible of chachma is mitzaref l'chachma, meaning that chachma is the combiner of words. That's where the combination, the word combos come from. Since the formation of the words that contain the insight reflects the nature of insight's articulation, and I'm going to explain what this is. We discussed in the last few weeks, and you may know this already prior to these sessions, Chachma is very different than Bina. Chachma is creative intelligence, and Bina is analytical thought. So Chachma is new ideas, creative ideas, and Bina is analytical. Bina is figuring stuff out, applying it also to other things that you already know, etc. Two different things. So where in the soul does the process of choosing the words come from? Do I start the book, it was a dark and stormy night? Or do I start the book and say, a dark and stormy night it was? Where does that come from? When you're writing, it's kind of like you're channeling something. Something's being channeled. It's like, why those words and not other words? Why that combination in that order and not a different combination in a different order? Where does that come from? comes from chachma, comes from the creativity of the soul. It's creative thought, creative wisdom. It's the power of creativity of the soul that generates the specific words that you're going to use either in your writing or more specifically in this case, in your speech. So when you're speaking, you have an idea in mind that you want to share. But what words are you going to use? And how are you going to take the listener through that journey? That all comes from chachma. The point, it doesn't come from the mouth. The mouth doesn't have intelligence. It's just a mechanism, a delivery mechanism by which all those ideas come out. So the idea, the seichel itself doesn't come from the mouth. Even the choice of words doesn't come from the mouth. It comes from chachma. Let's look at the parentheses.
That's why we're able to not say anything.
Correct. Because the lips don't have the, right. Because we have the ability to say, I have an idea, I have a way to share it. I'm not going to share it because there's that mental choice. It's all flowing from the mind. That's his point. It's all flowing from the mind.
I once had a business associate that was so into the power of speech that he used to tell me, if you're going to say something, before you say, think if it benefits you in any way, shape, or form. If not, don't say it.
Don't say it. Or as our mothers used to tell us, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all, right? The classic refrain. All right, now in the parentheses, although the development of the insight, he just so you know what he's going to do here. It's so beautiful. It's like psychology, mystical psychology right here. He's going to differentiate between the articulation of the idea. He's going to differentiate between the development of the idea in your mind versus the articulation of the idea. Development comes from bina, articulation comes from chachma. Okay, bina is how you understand it. Chachma is how you choose to articulate it. Okay, just so you know. Okay, and now let's jump into parentheses. Although the development of the insight stems from the power of bina, because again, bina means that how you understand it. The actual words used to express the idea stem from chachma, which transcends bina, which sounds a little crazy, because the idea is fleshed out in the brain, in the space of bina. But the word choice, how you, right, that siruf, the combination of letters and words, and how you do that, that is of a creative dimension. That's chachma. Could be. They could say that, but chachma is usually translated as wisdom. The challenge with that, and bina is usually understanding, wisdom, understanding, and das is knowledge. In English, I don't know that these words have enough of a distinction between the three. In Kabbalah, if we understand the concept, then we might use different terms. Chachma is creative intelligence, bina is analytical intelligence, and das is applied intelligence. Three different realms of the human mind, three different experiences within the cognitive experience. Chachma is when you are in a creatively cognitive state where you're thinking of new ideas. It's a brainstorming session, right? You're in a meeting and it's like, let's come up with new ideas. We want to come up with ideas to engage a certain segment of the community. Let's say you're in a synagogue, in a shul, and you want to engage a certain segment of the community. Let's come up with creative ideas. Great. That's gonna rely on chachma. Now a person says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to create a Hanukkah program that is going to be 20,000. How many Jews are in Atlanta? 160,000 Jews. We're going to create a Hanukkah program that's going to get 20,000 Jews in the same place at the same time, celebrating Hanukkah. Let's do it. It's going to be big. It's going to be huge. We'll have, massive bands and Miami Boys Choir and all that stuff. And they'll sing Yerushalayim. That one that's been going viral? No, it's a different one. Yerushalayim, no, it's a different one. Anyway, whatever. Doesn't matter. The point is, you have all these creative ideas, and then someone's like, 1 second. It's a great idea, but how are we going to make this work? Like, where are we doing this? Right? What's the budget looking like? How do we practically implement that? Boom, that's your bina kicking in. Chachma is creative, is wild. just creative thought. Bina is, how do we make this work? Let's figure out, does this make sense? Bina is, so Chachma would be, like in design and product design, Chachma would be the creative part of it, and Bina would be
The design.
well, no, Chachma would be the design. Bina would be the engineer who says either you can build it or you can't build it. Like you have the architect. Let's talk about a building. You have an architect draws like this beautiful design, and then you show it to an engineer, like that building's not going to stand. Like you can't build that building. There's no way. You can't build it. But then they go back to creative. How do you modify it in order for it to work? So you have this interplay between the creative team and the engineering team, and between the ideas and the implementation to make sure that eventually it works.
And is Das when you're in the building itself?
Das is when you connect with an idea so much that you are different.
That's belief.
Das is more than belief. Das is, remember those commercials? Maybe they still run. Remember those commercials about people starving in Africa and all that? Remember that? Yeah. So Bina is understanding the problem. Das is feeling the problem. Das is empathizing somewhat with the problem. Das is where you not only understand that it's theoretically a thing, but that you put yourself in the picture. You put yourself you connect the dots. That's bad. You connect yourself with that idea. All right, so that's Chachma Bina Das. The point is like this. The idea in your mind, if it's fleshed, if you understand it, it means it went through Bina. In other words, if you have like a light bulb that goes, oh my gosh, I think I got an idea, that's Chachma. When you understand it well, that's Bina. But when you articulate it, when you begin formulating words for it to speak or to write, not in your head, but when you formulate words that you're going to use and you make that choice, that's actually coming from Chachma, not Bina. That's what he says here. Okay, so we'll start again the parentheses. Although the development of the insight, the way you understand it, stems from the power of Bina, the actual words used to express the idea stem from Chachma, which transcends Bina. It comes from an actual higher power. In other words, although the words are formed according to the insight they contain, in other words, you're going to say, you're going to express the idea. Nevertheless, the same insight can be expressed in different words. For example, the words Adon Olam, Hashem Malach, right? The words Adon Olam, which mean master of the world, contain the concept of sovereignty and rulership, expressing God's reign and control over the world. He's giving an example, case study. The words Adon Olam, but the same concept can be conveyed by other words, such as Melech Olam, king of the world, and so on. Why did the composers of Adon Olam choose the words Adon Olam and not Melech Olam? Melech Olam, why not? Same idea. Adon means master. Melech means king. It's the same idea. Sovereignty, rulership.
Artistic license.
Yeah, but where does that come from? So the idea, Chachma. The point is to map it in the brain, map it in the soul. It's specifically Chachma. Bina is the idea that God is in control. Chachma is which word are you going to use to express it? Adon Olam, Melech Olam. When you write something, when you speak and you articulate in a certain way, where does that word choice come from? The idea comes from Bina. The word choice, which seems to be almost secondary, actually comes from a higher source, which is Chachma. You with me on this? That's what he says. Okay, let's continue. The choosing of these particular words does not stem from page 30. Insight itself. In other words, the word choice doesn't come from Bina, from the idea itself, but rather from the power of permutation and the way that Koach HaMitzarev, the power of permutation, which configures and combines the letters to contain the insight. In other words, when you and I are speaking, listen to what's going on. If our brains are lighting up according to Kabbalah, here's how they light up. Your Bina is active because you're channeling your idea, what you know, which is Bina, how you understand it. You're channeling that. And at the same time, your Chachma is lighting up with your every moment, your choice of words. Your Chachma is lighting up. Your Chachma is choosing the words to express your Bina. There's this interplay between Chachma and Bina at every moment. In other words, every moment you're creatively thinking how somewhere in your head, very quickly, How am I going to express what I'm trying to express? So the idea is Bina. The word choice is coming from Chachma. Both are lit up in your brain, Kabbalistically, when you are speaking. At times, page 30, second line at the end of the line. At times, the power of permutation, forms words in one way, and at times in another way. And this power of permutation, as we just said before, is the power of Chachma, from which is derived the articulation of the insight and which determines the formation of the words which will contain the insight. So, again, Chachma is how you articulate. The idea that you're articulating is from Bina. How you articulate and with which words you articulate, that is Chachma. So again, and here he kind of wraps up this piece of the conversation. So again, speech contains, one second. All of the heavy lifting, therefore, is happening in the brain. All the heavy lifting of speech is happening in the mind, in the seichel. Bina has the idea. Chachma is choosing the words, right? Chachma and Bina. Bina is the idea. Chachma is choosing the words. So what's the mouth doing? What's the koach hadibur? What's the power of speech doing? Executing, just expressing what the brain is doing. So again, as we wrap up, as we conclude this idea, speech contains no more than what it receives from the intellect through the language of thought. Speech is not innovative, it would seem. It would seem speech is merely a recipient, It's mechanical. It's just, speech is only what it receives from the intellect, chachma and bina, through the language of thought. It would follow that no insight, no additional insight and enlightenment could be attained through speech that is not already present in the idea as it is in the brain, since the brain is the source of all that speech reveals. It would make sense to say, as he just said, that speech would not add a thing, because speech is simply conveying what the mind is processing. Yet, and I mentioned this question at the end of last session, this is the question that we're encountering here in black and white, yet we see an additional enlightenment of the concept when it is verbalized more than in its initial stage of revelation, as just demonstrated. Yet, he says, we find the ultimate paradox. I don't know if it's the ultimate, but a paradox. And that is that although on the one hand, speech is merely the recipient from thought and from ideas and from feelings, nonetheless, somehow magically, speech adds to an idea. When you speak, there is an additional enlightenment that happens more than existed in the brain before you spoke. And we're going to continue inside. He's about to demonstrate this using examples that we're all familiar with, how we see that speech actually enhances ideas and feelings. In other words, as we speak, the ideas expand and deepen. To explain. All right, let me pause here for a moment. Make sense so far? Yes? Not at all.
Just giving you a hard time.
Perfect. I have you right where I want you. All right. Any questions? Let me check in with the online crew. Any questions? Any questions or comments so far? Let me take a quick look at the comments. Words and speech.
Thinking about a stroke victim.
Yeah.
Still has that thought in his head.
Wow.
Probably, right?
Powerful.
But
Can't.
doesn't have the mechanics of speech.
Right.
So sometimes our
Interesting.
speech could come in the form of writing.
I would say that writing is very similar to speech in this understanding. In other words, I don't think that writing is precluded from this conversation about speech, because when you write, I think a lot of the same things are triggered. A lot of the same things happen. Yeah. Words and speech inspire people to action. The pen is better than the sword. Yeah. Yeah. Speech is powerful. Depends who. Some people can channel. Yeah.
Some people could.
Some people can channel. Some people can. Who? Yeah. Yeah. Rabbi Yitzi Horowitz, the Chabad rabbi in Los Angeles, who has ALS.
Oh, he has a machine.
He has a machine that reads his eyes.
That's incredible.
He types a weekly Dvar Torah still.
With his eyes.
With his eyes. He's locked in his body. You know, you've seen Yitzi Horowitz for 10 years now. He was the most vibrant guy, young guy. Has a family, kids. He lives now. He is a special place. Do you know Rabbi Yitzi? He's by the yeshiva. He's by Yoak. He's by where my son goes to yeshiva. They make a minyan for him. So he's no, Los Angeles.
Oh, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, yeah. He's in LA. He was a shliach in where was he? Temecula. Yeah, one of
Your
the
son's in LA?
my son's in LA.
The only place far, you could have sent him to Seattle. Atlanta.
Right. Yeah, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. Anyway, yeshiva's great. Yeah, Baruch Hashem. No, they don't have. But he means like distance wise.
Did you send them there to become a Democrat?
I said we're not getting political. This is not no politics.
But it's actually coming from California.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is that the power of articulation is typically speech, but as you said, doesn't have to be speech. It could be the hands writing or typing. It could be the eyes communicating, right? It could be many forms of communication. But the point is going to be the same, that as we express, more ideas are generated, which seems kind of crazy because the expression should just be delivering what was already there. It would seem that it's just a delivery mechanism. Why would it stir additional ideas? And yet it does. So let's now go inside. Let's take a look at how he articulates the idea that of the avalanche, as it were, of speech, the power of speech. To explain, every intellectual idea that emerges from the source of intellect. Okay, so I guess we have to establish one thing. Every idea that you have, that I have, that we have, comes from the koach hamaskil. Koach hamaskil is the power of innovation of the mind, the source of ideas. So every intellectual idea that emerges from the source of intellect appears in measured and limited form. In other words, as an idea emerges, so it comes in measured and limited form in its length, width, depth, and particular mode of revelation. But when it takes the form of speech, so that's how the idea emerges initially. But when we then commit it to speech and articulating it to someone else, we see clearly that the idea expands immensely, far surpassing its prior state when it emerged from the intellect into the language of thought, and from there continued on into speech. So in other words, when we speak, you would think, well, that's like, that doesn't do anything. That's just taking the idea and just sharing it. No, something magical happens. The idea expands immensely. For then, in other words, previously, it is constricted and confined in the mind within certain parameters. But when it is verbalized, so the idea, the way it is initially is limited, right? It's confined and constricted within parameters. But when it's verbalized, it expands immensely with many details and ramifications, incomparably surpassing its initial stage in the words of thought. So you have an idea that you know, and you thought about the idea, and then you share it with someone else. Suddenly the idea becomes like three-dimensional. It expands, it grows, it gets much larger. Length, let's continue. Similarly, back inside. When a person verbalizes an idea, he discovers several subjects to which the idea can be applied. You ever have this experience? You start talking about an idea and you're like, oh, wait a second. That also explains this. And that also explains that's connected. You start weaving connections that you didn't think about before. You thought about the idea in your head, but you didn't make all these connections. Now you're sharing it. Now you're articulating. Now you're speaking these ideas. The next thing you know, your mind is figuring out all these connections. The idea can then be extracted and brought down from one level to the next until even one with limited understanding can grasp it. In other words, when you're speaking, suddenly you can draw analogies and parables and examples that can bring down the idea even to someone who doesn't have a lot of advanced knowledge. It says about King Solomon that he could give King Solomon, the wisest of all men. What was his wisdom? He could bring 3,000 parables for the same idea. 3,000 parables for the same idea.
That's smart. How many wives do we have?
So Kabbalah asked the question. Kabbalah asks, the Torah says not to have, kings should be careful with that. So Kabbalah asked the question, why does he need 3,000 examples of the same thing? No, Kabbalah says. He took an idea and brought it down 3,000 levels. Every parable was bring it down one more level. Imagine Albert Einstein walks into a classroom of fifth graders teaching science, way over their head. You would imagine. But imagine if Einstein could take his deepest theories and bring them down with examples and hands-on activities that even the fifth grader could understand. That would be truly brilliant. If Einstein could make his deepest theories understood even to a fifth grader, that would be remarkable. King Solomon, that's the wisdom of King Solomon. Wasn't that he was so brilliant? But he could take the brilliance and bring it down level. What he says over here is we all do that on some, not on the Solomonic level, but we all do that on some sort of level. And when we speak, oftentimes we gain new insights and gain new parables and applications that we can then use to bring it down lower. This is the third line from the bottom on page 30. This is true even if when he initially conceives the idea and brings it into the language of thought, and even when he considers how to express the idea to another, he does not yet find within himself the means with which to make it accessible to a person of limited understanding. In other words, when he thought about it, he had no idea how he was going to explain it to the fifth grader. He had no idea. How is it going to work? I have no idea. Indeed, in its initial stage, it is comprehensible only to those with advanced minds. But precisely when he verbalizes the concept, he discovers further strata of thought to which the concept can be applied. Through this, the illumination contained within the concept descends, this being the above-mentioned length of the concept, and becomes accessible even to one of limited understanding. So speech, the power of speech, is that it takes an idea that you've thought about, an idea that you know well, an idea that you've thought about how you're going to speak about it. You've created the narrative in your mind, but when you actually speak it, you gain new elements of length, which means the ability to draw it forward to someone even of a more limited understanding. Come up with new ideas, parables, applications that make it understandable even to someone of a more quote unquote limited understanding of that topic. Does that make sense? All of that innovated by speech, which makes no sense. Speech is like, I've used the example again and again because it's the example of our discourse. It's like the cup. Whatever the contents you poured in, that's where you're going to get out. No, when you pour it into the cup and then you pour it out into the other person, as it were, suddenly it enhances the idea. Instead of this raspberry tea, it's suddenly, I don't know what it is. It's suddenly super, expanded, whatever it is. It's a new beverage from what I put in initially. That is the power of speech. We're going to stop here. He continues to talk about depth. We'll do this next time. Depth, speech and Torah study, width, talks about how when we speak, it enhances the depth of the idea, the width of the idea. That's why we study Torah verbally. He talks about speech and love and speech and anger, and that's going to be a major focus of the next session or so, which is the idea of, is it good to speak our emotions or is it not good to speak our emotions? Reishis Chachma, as we'll see next time, hopefully, Reishis Chachma, which the book of Kabbalah says, an antidote to anger is silence, right? Schweig. Don't always speak, because when we speak, it actually enhances the feeling more than it was. That's also right. That's also, but the idea is, sometimes you speak and you felt you were upset about something, and then you spoke and you didn't realize how upset you really were, right? It's like, oh, not only that, I can't believe, and suddenly it magnifies, because speech is the magnifier. Now, we haven't answered the question, wherein lies the power of speech to magnify? Speech should just be the cup. Whatever you pour in is what you're going to get out, and yet it magnifies it. What's the creative juice of speech? We haven't gotten to that yet. We will get to that, but that is the major conversation of this text. All right. So in conclusion, I want to just quickly recap what we did today. We spoke about the 4 forms of life on this planet: inanimate life, vegetation, animal life, and human life. And we talked about how human beings are called the medaber, the communicator. I asked the question, communication, intelligence seems to be the hallmark of humanity. Why medaber? Why speaker? Masculine, intellectual. So I explained, based on other sources in Kabbalah, not this text necessarily, but I explained that that medaber, speech, it pulls from the depth of the soul, the part of you that's not stuck in you, the part of you that's more universal, the part of you that's connected intimately with someone else, right? When we speak and we can really share our feelings and our thoughts, that bridges the gap between two and makes two into one, because now both are sharing the idea or the feeling. And that collapses the distinctions between human beings, and that's something truly magical. Then we got into our text and we talked about how speech not only collapses boundaries between human beings, but also speech has the ability to magnify the ideas that we had, which makes no sense because the content comes from Bina, the word choice comes from Chachma. It seems like Dibur, speech, shouldn't bring anything to the table, and yet it does. Wherein lies the power of speech? To be continued. We will talk about that. Just want to conclude with this insight. Number one, I would say the obvious takeaway is we have to be careful what we talk about. We have to, because speech is a powerful generator. It's not just a passive recipient and conveyor, it's a generator. So ideas that are maybe not so healthy, when we speak about them, we're going to get more of. Feelings that are not healthy, right? Negative feelings. If we speak about it, it could magnify. Now, again, not, or maybe not again, I don't want to knock the notion of expressing feelings and you know, getting that out and the process of therapy and all of that is kosher. We have to be careful when we utilize this. It's like what the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya about guilt and these negative emotions. It's like holding a knife, right? Make sure you're a surgeon. Make sure it's a sterile environment. It's a contained environment. It's a controlled environment, and you know what you're doing before you use the knife to cut into a body. Make sense? Otherwise, it's not called surgery. It's called murder. It's going to hurt and not heal. So if you want to, you sometimes need a sharp tool. You need a powerful tool for a powerful purpose, but respect the tool. Speech is powerful. We have to respect the tool. To just talk and whatever and this and that. But you said lashon hara, gossip. It never makes us feel good ultimately, and it can cause damage. This class is not necessarily about lashon hara, but you know it is about the power of speech. So I think immediate takeaway number one is about respecting the power of speech and what it is in our soul. And I'll also say that, you know, we spoke about the four, just to conclude very quickly, we spoke about the four types of life on earth. We each have these four within us. In other words, there is the element of inanimate within us and vegetation and animal and human. We can speak and collapse. We can speak and bring someone else into our world, and that's powerful. That's speech. We can move. We're not stuck to where we started. Like, right, we're not like a plant, a tree that's stuck inside. We can move. We can grow. That's very powerful. Right? We're not stuck in one place. We have the ability of lateral movement. That's powerful. That's like an animal. Like a tree, growth happens when we're plugged into the ground, when we have firm roots. I know that's a little bit different than what I just said, but we need firm roots also to help us grow. And sometimes also it's good to be still and silent like the rock, to realize that our energy comes from something beyond us, and be a little bit humbled and awestruck by the beauty of our world. Thank you very much for joining me today for Kabbalah Cafe. Hope you enjoyed it, and wishing you all a Shavua Tov. All right, a few quick announcements now that we've concluded the study. So first of all, any questions or comments? I'll stay around for a few minutes. But number two, tomorrow night we continue the happiness course taught by Rabbi Moshe Shem Tov, and we also launch a brand new course called Stranger Things. You may have seen the Netflix show Stranger, you may be aware of the Netflix show Stranger Things. Where do you think that came from? That comes from this course. Okay. So this course is all about Judaism's approach to the stranger things of life. Ghosts, spirits, souls, energies, demons, shadim, right? All of these, the occult.
Going on at the same time?
One is at 7:30 and one's at 8. There will be some overlap. There will be a little bit of overlap between the happiness and the thing. So the Stranger Things is being taught by Mrs. Nomi Freeman. She's an incredible teacher, and it's an incredible curriculum, 3-part series. It happens to be launching October 31st. I don't know how that timing worked out, right? It may magically, launching on Halloween, but
You couldn't move them farther apart?
it's just the scheduling. It's kind of complicated. He's here. He's here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's another one. I know who you're talking about also. Different. I'm sure they're cousins. So that's going on Monday. Tuesday night is another thing, but Wednesday night we're launching the JLI course called My God. 25 of the top questions that you might have had about God explored: theological questions, philosophical questions, questions of faith and religion and Judaism. And it's going to be fun and fast paced. It's a tremendous course. All right, that's Wednesday, and I'm out of announcements. I don't even know anymore what to announce. So thank you for joining me this morning. Appreciate it. You can take it. Yeah,
Along with
absolutely.
the power of speech in today's day and age, even more powerful, the power of what you write on the internet,
Yes,
social media.
Jeff makes a very good point.
Speech could just be one-on-one, or what, I mean, that's disseminating it to.
Correct. Safe travels. Great to meet you. Nasiya tova. Hope to see you soon. You're right, Jeff. You're 100% right. The words that we use today have an effect that are far-reaching. There's the famous story of the fellow who came to the rabbi and said, "I said something not nice about someone else, and how do I do tshuva?" He says, "Bring me a pillow." Brings him a pillow. He says, "Now open up the pillow." Opens up the pillow. He says, "Now shake the feathers outside in the street." He says, "Okay, I did that." Comes back. He says, "Okay, now collect them all." He's like, "I can't." He's like, "Exactly. Once you speak," but social media is much bigger than that. Social media is, if one conversation could have such a large effect, how much more so one post? You have to be careful.
It's
powerful.
chaos in our
It could
society.
create chaos. It could also create amazing things, but it can create.
Can
create. Right.
Bitterness.
Yeah.
But the technology.
Yeah.
The technology inherent in it was for the purpose of becoming a Mashiach.
100%. That's for sure. Everything is for the person of Mashiach. Yeah.
Everything has a plus and a minus.
Yeah.
Except for John.
I want to ask you number one.
Yes.
Because I've read the stories.
Yeah.
And my impression was that he wasn't a very bright person. He wasn't. I mean.
Oh, interesting. I never got
seemed to indicate that he made a mistake. Or he
Right. Interesting. Interesting.
And my cousins had that question too, when they said, I'm going to try to find out a little bit more about it, if possible, to dispel some of that. Maybe it's true.
Right. I don't know. I would have to do some research into it.
I know he's successful. I know he's
Right.
very
Right. I would imagine he's a holy dude, but I don't know. Right. That might be it. Might have been humble. Yeah.
But did he have a lot of?
I don't know. But his descendant is certainly has a cup on her shoulders. See that? See that? I didn't even know that, but I could tell.
It's gonna say something, I don't know, if this is applicable to anything that you said, but my grandmother. She
Yeah.
And she left and when she came back, the road was gone. Sometime later, the neighbor came to her for help. She had to go into her apartment. She had a rug on her floor. Now, when my mother told me this story,
Wow.
I said, "Why didn't my
Yeah,
why
just
didn't
take the
you
rug
say
back,
that?
right.
It's my rug."
Yeah, you took my rug.
Because she was a person of,
Right.
you can't share.
Without knowing, right.
I never did that.
Yeah.
I wrote a children's book based on this story.
Wow.
And at first I left it because she didn't get her rug back.
Right.
A publisher told me, you can't leave it like that. You have to give the story a positive ending for children.
And you're thinking that was the positive ending, that she was able to not embarrass and
Well,
interesting.
I mean, I did put a different ending on the story.
Yeah.
It was, I fixed it so that in some way it was, the interpretation became different, and I gave it a different ending. Where she got the rug back and it was all.
Yeah. Okay.
But is that true? My grandmother did the rug back.
I would say yes.
Oh, I won't.
Yes.
No, she couldn't show her.
The
Yeah.
team will see it.
There's the Talmud says
Yeah.
that somebody who accepts and doesn't shame is a very holy person. For her, it wasn't worth the shame. The rug wasn't worth more than the shame. I can't say that. Norm, we'll see you. Good to see you this morning. Pleasure, pleasure. It's hard to say definitively how somebody should view that stuff, but for somebody to say, the rug is not worth it for that person's shame, that's commendable in my book.
Because to me, stealing is an awful thing.
Yeah, but that's
Okay,
the
something
other.
belongs to you.
Yeah, but she has to live with that. But I'm not. Yeah,
Okay.
there are many stories like that. I'm not to diminish that story, but there's many teachings of our sages along those lines. It's a very, very special thing. That was your mother,
I agree.
your grandmother. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing. To be continued. I'll see if I can do some research. I'll see.
I have a
Hey.
very practical question.
Sure.
If you give tzedakah in memory of your parents
Yes.
before Yisker,
Right.
prior,
Right.
and then you say Yisker, do you have to give again?
Again. Right.
You
Right.
can think about it and get back.
Because you
to
had in
me.
mind, I would have to. Yeah, that's probably a practical halachic. It's probably discussed somewhere. I can take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
Have a good
Great to
week.
see you. Hey, how's it going? Good, good, good.
Bring the kosher gourmet.
I don't know if so here's the thing. As of this morning, they're doing another drop off in the area for another program. I may join in with that. And not only I think I'm going to do that. And that way it'll just be done.
Yeah, that would be safer.
Yeah. Pleasure.
Ray, I'm happy to take up today.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a schlep though. It's a little bit out of the way. No?
Seems to go with, oh. So, but they come already in Daria, but
I will let you know. I think we're just going to do like a consistent delivery, but I appreciate the offer. Thank you. All right, David, good to see you. Catherine and Adam, great to see you guys. Just the question about the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel they didn't give me a URL that works easily. So it's we'll see. So it is a bit of a complicated link. Give me a second. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on. See if I can link it down here. Bam, 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 bam. Here we go. Boom. Now, just so you know, I know, David, you asked for this. Just so you know, that channel is live, but I haven't yet posted classes. I just posted one video, and that's the promo video for the JLI course. So stay tuned, though. We're going to post all the classes in the next little bit. All right. Have a wonderful day. See you guys. Catherine, David, and Adam. Oh, and Catherine, I saw that you asked. Hold on. Catherine, you asked, I wish this class were Zoom on YouTube. Right. Stranger Things in the Course About God, like to take and pay for. Zoom and YouTube. Yes. So they will be, I believe both will be on Zoom. Stranger Things Monday night will be on Zoom, and the My God course will be on Zoom. Even though it doesn't necessarily mention on the website, there will be Zoom options for both, just so you know. All right. We'll see you guys. Take care. Have a Shavua Tov. Have a wonderful week. Bye.